spiritualists, those on the journey, often feel very deflated because they see how far they are from where they want to be. But they also need to give themselves some credit and kindness and say, well, but look where you were and look where you are now. And when you see that you have progressed, then you think, well, maybe I can make up the rest of the journey.
Thank you so much again for joining us this evening. We've got a full house. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for joining us again. So before we get started, I just want to introduce you to the topic. So our topic for today is being a conscious change maker. We've been asked to make sure we present Maharaj some challenging questions on the topic. Maharaj, of course. So before I ask any questions, Danny, I would like you to please start with your first question for Maharaj.
Hello, everyone. So who are the people that are here for the first time? Put down there. Hey, welcome. Welcome, everybody, but welcome those people for the first time. I know that everybody's keen to hear from Maharaj, but I just wanted to give some context around why I chose the topic, if that's okay with you,
Of course, please do.
And because I'm not actually part of the Think Gita team. I took the Think Gita course, and I also have followed Keshava Swami around, and I see him to be a very inspiring teacher to me. And so recently there was an event, and I don't know if you remember, but I came up to you after the event, and I was like, I want to make a change. I want to bring spirituality into my life. I want it to be dynamic. And I said, I'm thinking about doing an event in January. Would you be interested in talking at the event? And Keshava Swami said, why don't you ask me some questions on the 30th of November? So I was like, But I was called to service. I was called here to service. And so I was a little bit apprehensive about doing it in the beginning. But the reason why I'm saying that and giving it some context is because sometimes it's important to step up. And I personally in my life would like to be a conscious change maker. And so this is like a first step in that, to step here. So I hope that inspires someone today. Just to give you some context, like I'm no guru, this is where the knowledge comes from. So I know, but I wondered whether or not you could, first of all, how are you? How are you?
How am I? Oh my God, no one's ever asked me that. No, I'm doing good. I'm really happy to be back in the UK. I was doing quite a bit of traveling. But there's nothing like London. Of course, according to the ancient scriptures, nowhere in this world is home, because actually we're all spiritual beings and we're all meant to be part of another kind of existence beyond the material world. So actually nowhere in one sense in the material world is home, but if somewhere would be home, I guess it would be London, because I'm was that a clap for London? Do you get a clap for Wembley as well? So I guess I grew up in London, so I feel very at home here. And I think it's probably home because it's for two reasons. Because I think in London, my best friends are here. And that's really beautiful. And I think the second reason is because London is where I guess I get the most opportunities to serve others and contribute. And so I think wherever we have an opportunity to contribute and an opportunity to connect, I think that becomes home, no matter geographically where it may be. So yeah, contribute and connect.
Well, welcome back. We're pleased to have you back. So one of the questions there's many questions, hopefully we have the time. But one of the questions that I wanted to talk about actually was that the Gita is obviously a very powerful book. And I had some quotes that I was going to read out actually, but it turns out that there's a big poster right there with some of the quotes that I was actually going to say of all the famous people, all the well-known people where the Gita has touched their life and inspired them in a way to be very conscious change makers. And there's this story of Mahatma Gandhi at a station, and he's just leaving, and there's loads of people there wanting to see him. And someone says, Mahatma Ji, give me a message to take back to my people. And he writes a piece of paper and he hands out that piece of paper. And this person goes away and he looks at the piece of paper, he looks at the message, and he says, my life is my message. That's what he says, my life is my message. So how inspiring and powerful is Vedic knowledge and the Gita in inspiring people to make a conscious change? And how would you define what a conscious change maker is?
Okay, start with the easy one. Huh? Yeah, I think a conscious change maker, first and foremost, is the person who lives and breathes what they seek to share with the world. It's interesting that according to the Vedic teachers, we live in different cosmic cycles. So just like you have seasons in a year, like you have, in London you have only one season, rain. But generally you have 4 seasons, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, and then it circles. So in the cosmic cycle, it's also said that there are 4 cosmic ages. And the current age that we're living in is the age of Kali, it's said in Sanskrit, the age of darkness. And it's interesting, the 2 qualities which are outlined as prominent in this age are quarrel and hypocrisy, which is really, really interesting. They say, so hypocrisy and people sharing something with the world or saying something or presenting themselves as something, but then inside being something very, very different. That is actually one of the most destructive things in the world. It becomes even more destructive than when leaders and people in positions of power and influence are hypocritical. And so the first thing about a conscious change maker is that there's real integrity. In other words, what they're trying to share with the world is something that they've genuinely imbibed and experiencing within their own lives. And when someone comes in as a change maker in that way, then you know that they're sharing something good, because they wouldn't be sharing it if it didn't have a good effect on their life. And so I think that's the first step. And so even as monks, what we try to do is really try to take some time in our life, every single day, every single week, every single year, to kind of look deeply within ourselves and make sure we're living what we seek to share with the world. And I think just that one small thing is huge.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And over to Tricia. But I wanted to say, because you actually spoke to it there, you said about people sometimes there's a disconnect, what's going on the outside and what's feeling on the inside. And there's a cultural commentator called David Brooks from the New York Times. He wrote a book called The Second Mountain. And what he speaks about in this is that people want to make a difference and they climb the first mountain. And this first mountain is very career driven, very materialism. It's I can make myself happy. And not everyone, but a lot of people get to the top of that mountain and they feel that disconnect that you're talking about. They feel like, this is not it. I've climbed the first mountain, this is not it. And they look over and they see the second mountain. And this mountain is heart-led, it's soul-led. And people want to get that. They want to have that inner vision. And I know that you speak to this concept in Gita 3, because you speak about, what is it exactly you say? You say that the world tells us to pursue our dreams, but the Gita tells us to discover our spiritual reality. So I wonder if you could speak to that, because you use that analogy. It's like the second method is very similar.
Yeah, as I was mentioning right at the beginning of this talk, this world is not actually our true home. It's just almost, a place of learning, a place of evolution, but that we're all actually spiritual beings. We live in another realm. We're of a different nature. And therefore, the Bhagavad Gita gives a really, really beautiful analogy. It gives the analogy of a banyan tree. And it explains there's a real banyan tree, and then there's a river, and then there's a reflection. And in the reflection, everything is upside down. And it seems to resemble that tree exactly, but when you enter it, you can't find what you're looking for. And so this world is something like that. It's almost a photocopy, an imitation, a reflection of the real reality. And therefore, what the Bhagavad Gita says is that instead of pursuing your dreams in the illusion, if you try to seek the reality of the spiritual world, then what you'll find is that the reality of the spiritual world far exceeds your greatest dreams in this world. And therefore, it really speaks to this spiritual calling, which is what we all look for. The sociologist Maslow said that we all have a hierarchy of needs. And on the base level, we have a need for security and safety, the basic necessities. And then Maslow says once you've achieved that, higher than that, what you seek is relationships. You seek exchange, emotional kind of gratification. And then Maslow says higher than that, you seek legacy, you seek contribution, you seek to make a mark on the world. But then Maslow says even beyond that, you look for self-actualization. But it's interesting, although Maslow came up with this model, when it came to self-actualization, Maslow couldn't actually say much about what that was. But said there's definitely an inner calling that we all search for. And so, the second mountain is probably once you've done all of those things, you then seek like, okay, but what is beyond all of it? And when you find that, and then you share that with the world, then you really become a conscious change maker, because you contribute an ingredient or something to the world that actually everyone is looking for, but that most people are unaware of. And it becomes so exciting when you're able to come into the world and actually be an instrument in helping people to find what they've always been looking for. Not in a judgmental way, not in a kind of coercive way, not in a way of I'm better than you, you should listen to me, but just in a genuine mood of compassion and kindness, to try and open doors for people to find what they've always been looking for. There's nothing more amazing you can do in your life, I think. And that's why being a conscious change maker speaks to my heart so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Thank you, Tani. So, Maharaj, you mentioned a couple of things there. I have a few questions, but I'll start with one. Based on what you said, it seems like the journey is more internal than external. So when we talk about making change, you mentioned two aspects of it. One is the change from having a materialistic or physical view of life and of who we are, and cultivating that change towards our ultimate nature, to be more clear about what we actually are as spiritual beings. And the second thing you mentioned was being dedicated to helping other people understand that as well. So as you said, without being, let's say, pushy in any way, trying to nudge people in the same direction. So my question is, when we talk about making change, first and foremost, am I looking to make a change within myself, or am I looking to make a change within the world, outside of myself?
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you. I think they go hand in hand. We find ourselves by thinking of others. They say you earn a living by what you get, but you earn a life by what you give. Sometimes people have this notion that until I've found myself, until I'm really clear, until I become perfect, then I can't really do anything for the world. But actually, the Vedic teachers explain it's a symbiotic process, that we're discovering ourselves, and then with whatever we've discovered, we're going out into the world and sharing that. And as we go out into the world and share that, we come back in our own hearts with those experiences which further nourish us, which then help us to go out again. And it's almost like breathing. You breathe in, and then you breathe out, and then you breathe in. This is the rhythm of life. And therefore, the Vedic teachers explain we're souls, but what is the essential quality of a soul? A soul is meant to serve. And so the process of discovery of being a spiritual being is the process of service. And therefore, from day one in our spiritual tradition, we're always taught the importance of serving and giving and assisting and contributing. And Rabindranath Tagore, he says, I slept and I dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and I realized life was service. I began to serve and I realized service is joy. And so there's a certain beauty in giving. We live to give. And this kind of, the more we fill our life with opportunities to serve others, it nourishes our own internal journey. Does that?
Yeah. Thank you so much. So giving. So when we talk about the change we're trying to cultivate, we're talking about cultivating a sense of giving within us, a sense of service. I would like to ask you, in this modern world, and I have asked this question before on a Think Gita podcast, that in a world that we almost feel exploits our labor and we have so little time to ourselves, and you mentioned Maslow's hierarchy, the amount the average person has to go through just to meet their basic needs, just to meet a sense of security like shelter and food. How do we change that mindset that's now so deeply ingrained in us that when we give something, it's in exchange for something else? And a lot of people do, as I mentioned, feel potentially slightly exploited by how much time and energy they have to give just to meet their basic needs. Now, in this mind state, which I believe a lot of people find themselves in quite often, how do we bring ourselves to become selfless and giving? And like you mentioned, feel like it's breathing, giving and taking. So when we feel empty, how do we cultivate that sense of service within ourselves?
Yeah. The first thing is, I would say that giving doesn't require loads of time, it doesn't require loads of resource, it doesn't require incredible abilities. Giving is just a disposition.
Yeah.
They say the greatest gift you can give someone is the quality of your own attention. And these things don't take much, just a willingness to want to give that gift to someone. And so the first thing is, I would say that there's plenty of ways that we can give, even in the struggle of life, in the struggle of survival. You can hold a door open for someone. You can ask someone how they are. You can, lend an ear to someone who obviously needs to express something. There are many, many small and beautiful ways in which you can serve others. And what you'll actually find is that when you serve and you have that mood of giving, then something magical happens in your life whereby more and more opportunities will open up to serve in bigger and better ways. One of our teachers, Bhakti Tirtha Swami, he said, when your desire to serve is so great that you go beyond your capacity, but you continue on without hesitation, at that moment, empowerment occurs. So there's a sense in which when we really want to help, when we really want to contribute, then the universe kind of opens up all these opportunities for us to do it. And so in service, we don't need to worry about capacity. They say, do the possible, and then you can eventually do the impossible. But it requires that spirit. And you're right, you can't really be a giver unless you're experiencing something that you want to give. And therefore, the spirit of giving comes from a heart that is spiritually inspired, spiritually nourished. And therefore, everyone has to take that time. And so we all do that. Like now is December, and in January, I am going off the grid. Just to put that out there. Because, yes, we all need to take time. What will we share with the world? We need to be experiencing something. We need to be moved. I often say this is the Krishna consciousness movement, but it doesn't just mean a movement of spreading Krishna consciousness everywhere, but it means a bunch of people who are being moved by Krishna consciousness. And I always said to myself, I don't want to be just a deliverer of a scripted philosophical narrative, but what I want to try and share with people is something that I'm actually experiencing and feeling in my life. And so I think when we have that level of spiritual nourishment, then giving comes naturally.
Thank you.
Beautiful. I just love it. And that's what inspires me about you, is that you're doing that with the wisdom that breathes, but also bringing it to life. And that for me is what a conscious change maker is, that true embodiment that you spoke to. And what I love about the term conscious change maker is that, for me, that very often they're not two things that are put together, like consciousness, the conscious community, passive, meditators, don't do anything. Change maker, these people, they're out there in the world making change. So when we bring that together, and I can see that in you, which is absolutely beautiful to see. And going back to the slight analogy, we won't overuse the analogy of the second mountain, but going back to the analogy of the second mountain, what it actually talks about, and you'd speak about in Gita 3 as well, that for people, I've had a blank. 2 seconds.
No problem.
Yeah, sorry. When they get to the first mountain, in order to get to the second mountain, they have to go through the valley. So some people stay at the top of the first mountain and they have to go through a valley, but they can't do it on their own. They think they can do it on their own because they've used all the willpower to get to the first mountain, all this willpower. But actually what we need is like inspiration. We need a guide. We need a teacher. We need a paradigm shift. We need a new worldview. So how important is things like this, the Gita course, Think Gita, things out there in the world, teachers, how important is that for our revolution of consciousness and a new worldview?
Yeah, super important. You've often heard me talk about the African proverb, if you want to walk fast, then walk alone. But if you want to walk far, then walk with many. And so there's a sense in which when you create a conscious community, then we feed off each other, we learn from each other, we support. In a world in which everyone is going in a different direction, everyone has a different aspiration, to come together with conscious spiritualists, sincere spiritualists who are trying to move in the other direction is absolutely indispensable. And so communities like this are super important. And also having a coach, having a guide, having a mentor, having a buddy on the journey, having a guru. This is also super important. I felt as though in the first 10 years of my journey, I did make progress, but I only made limited progress because I never really let anyone into my life. I was surrounded by spiritual people, but I never really let anyone kind of really into my life. And later on, when I made that shift and I realized, no, I need someone who can kind of help me build a bigger vision for my life. And when I made that step of letting someone come into my life and being a little bit vulnerable like that, I found that it just began to open new worlds of opportunity. And so when the time is right and when one feels comfortable to avail of the opportunity of having a spiritualist who's perhaps a little further along the journey come into your life and start disrupting your life a little bit. Be careful. Spiritual disruptors, they come in and they begin to shift the paradigms. They begin to shake it up a little bit, and they kind of get you out of the comfort zone, and they help you to journey into the unknown, and they walk you through that valley. And you're like, I don't know, that mountain, the first one sounded okay, you know? But it's very beautiful. And so, yeah.
So community is definitely something we discussed quite a bit on our podcast and when we get together. And of course, I heard you say that before about if we want to go far, we should go together. Do you have any advice on how we can, of course, we come to places like this and hopefully we find ourselves in the right place at the right time. But any advice on how we can make it easier for ourselves to open up to the right people and how we can identify these people in our lives and how we can go about creating these relationships?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you come to a spiritual community, it's not that you'll necessarily resonate with everyone in the same way. Our community is also a colorful community. It takes them all, you know? And we have all different types of personalities, all different types of approaches, all different types of, just approaches. And therefore, even within a community, you'll have to find individuals who you have a like-mindedness with, who you feel on the same wavelength. And then relationships take investment. And it's about, as I said, being vulnerable, opening up, spending time. Many of you have heard me say this, but when I became a monk, I was almost like ready to go to the top of the mountain and, say, see you later to the world, And then when I joined the movement of the Krishna kind of teachings, every other discourse was about relationships. And I was like, relationships? Like, like, I don't want to have relationships. Like, I just want to be like with the divine. I'm ready to. And, but it was constantly stressed, the importance of connecting deeply with others. And over my years, I've tried to invest in that. And I can tell you hands down that now if you would ask me what my most valuable asset is in my spiritual journey, hands down, without a doubt, I would say it's my friendship with other people on the journey. And so, it's really easy to be in a community for a long time and not really connect deeply with anyone. But yeah, we should all try to make those connections because they're very, very beautiful.
Thank you. It's interesting because, as you mentioned, there's so many approaches, and we are talking specifically about Krishna, but people have a much broader belief system. There's many other deities or gods that they believe in, and there's so many ways that people go about their their spiritual life, and how they try and make progress in it. So there's the side of spirituality, especially around India, where there's an approach of being slightly more hermit-like, taking yourself away in the mountains, sitting in the caves. So that's obviously a big part of Indian culture and yogic culture, and it's known to be quite a common path for certain spiritualists. So it's something I've always wondered. How does that spiritual path compare to one of being actively involved in society? And is there something lacking there where they don't cultivate physical, spiritual connections with other people on the journey?
Yeah. Yeah, there are, like I think in our life we go through transitions. In Eastern teachings, it's said that there are 3 paths. One path is called the path of karma. Another path is called the path of jnana. And the third path is called the path of bhakti. Karma means the path of action or enjoyment. Jnana means the path of knowledge or detachment. And bhakti means the path of devotion or love. And it's interesting that actually when you look at most people's spiritual journeys, they go through all 3. They start on that first mountain, the path of trying to enjoy this world. And then it almost becomes like, there's no enjoyment in this world, it's empty. And then what happens is they go to the path of jnana, which is they get knowledge and then they just detract from the world. They almost want to escape the world. They almost just say kind of like, I'm done with life and relationships and trying to do anything. And then it's said that when you graduate even through that, then you come to the point of bhakti where you realize, no, there is so much to do and there is love to be had and there is exchange, but it has to be done in a spiritual way. So in the beginning, karma, we try to enjoy. Later on, jnana, we try to escape. But then in bhakti, we learn how to engage with the world in an appropriate way. And so, part of spiritual life is like that, that there's a certain stage where we almost feel like we just don't relate to the world and we don't want to be in the world and everything seems useless and we just don't feel like we belong here. It was so sweet. Once my mum, she came up to me and she said, "Can't you just be normal?" And I was like, well, I'm trying really hard, but it's like, I just can't connect with this world anymore. And so you'll find the yogis in India, many of them just turn away from the world. But the Vedic tradition explains that turning away from the world isn't the ultimate culmination of it, because we seek love, we seek experience, we seek to have taste, and that only happens in relationships. So yes, it's definitely a part of the spiritual journey, and sometimes we all feel like that, like I just want to run away. And sometimes it's also good to run away for a little time, in January for a month. But after some time, even when you do that, you kind of think like, now I think I need to go back and engage with a bit more heart, a bit more love.
So how? Really nice, really nice. So we've now come to this point where we've said, right, okay, so material life, some people have this experience where they think, well, I don't think this is for me, so I'm going to go to the spiritual side. So they go to the spiritual side and there's like, I just want to go to a cave. But no, now we're talking about integration, coming together. So at that point, now you're in the world and you're seeing someone like yourself and you think, well, I can think, wow, peace, love, like this, but so serene, all these kind of things come up. And then I can have an experience where, there's certain habits, bad habits that are in me, or I have a vision of where I want to be, and where I am now, and I can feel the gap between that from where I want to be, from where I am now. And I want to be encouraging to myself and inspired and support myself. And I don't want to feel guilty on the journey of like, I should be there or I should be that. Does anyone else experience that, like the gap between, like, you know, from where I am? And I've heard you say before, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you. So I want, like, with those habits and temptations and things in the world. So I wonder if you could elaborate or speak more to that. The idea is going to cost you.
Yeah, so there's a gap between where we are and where we want to be, and it's uncomfortable, it's frustrating, it's almost a bit deflating sometimes. Before even costing you, like, the first thing I would say is be kind to yourself and realize how far you've come. Spiritualists, those on the journey, often feel very deflated because they see how far they are from where they want to be. But they also need to give themselves some credit and kindness and say, well, but look where you were and look where you are now. And when you see that you have progressed, then you think, well, maybe I can make up the rest of the journey. So I think that aspect is really important. But yes, there's a constant battle with temptation. There's a constant battle with this force within us that makes us give up what we want most for what feels good now. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita tells Arjuna that this tendency, this trigger within us to constantly sell out to the easiest option is the eternal enemy of the progressive spiritualists. And so how do we give up temptation? Oscar Wilde, he says, I can resist everything except temptation. So how do you give up temptation? And that's where we tell people it will cost you. C stands for conviction. The only way you can give up temptation is if you have conviction that you can see something beyond that temptation which is so inspiring, so enchanting, so capturing to your mind that you're just convinced of that goal. You can't give up temptation unless you have a goal beyond the temptation that has captured you. And therefore, most people can't give up temptation because there's no North Star. There's nothing greater in their life that they're aiming for. So that must be there. O stands for openness. Once you have that conviction of the great place you want to go to, it's not that automatically the temptation goes away. Therefore, you need openness. You need to have relationships. You need to have a space where you can tell someone your successes, your failures, your hopes, your fears. You need emotional support. S stands for safety. If you want to go beyond that temptation to something greater, don't subject yourself to environments, situations, people which will trigger and agitate you. Protect the fences that protect you. And T stands for taste. Immediately begin to relish something better than that temptation that is there, and then naturally you'll be able to give it up. And that higher taste is the spiritual taste. The material things of this world become insignificant when we're experiencing something much deeper within ourselves. So the C, the conviction, protects us on the intellectual level. The O, the openness, protects us on our emotional level. The S, the safety, protects us on a practical level. And the T, the taste, protects us on a spiritual level. And when you're fortified on all of these levels, then you gain that resilience to not give up what you want most for what feels good now. And that one thing, if someone can achieve it in their life, it's the biggest game changer. Because it's the eternal enemy of the progressive person in this world, temptation.
Beautiful. And I would also, to extend that, is like would you also say that is a good way to approach, like, because there's demands in life, like we've got temptation, we've got demands in life, we've got pandemics, war, conflicts, cost of living crises, economic crises, and even a conscious change maker could feel overwhelmed by the demands in life. Even a conscious change maker could feel, wow. So how do we keep our hearts open in this world? How do we keep our hearts open so we can be conscious change makers?
A spiritualist never becomes insensitive. Sometimes people think the detachment of spirituality, or the sense in spirituality of the fatalism that the world is what it is and is karma, we can't do anything about it, this renders us kind of like somewhat cold to the world. But every spiritualist, genuine spiritualist, will realize that nobody should suffer. Nobody should go through pain. That's just not what any spirit soul is meant to be subjected to. And therefore, when a spiritualist sees the news, sees what's going on in the world, sees the chaos of the environment we're living in, they don't become bewildered because they know that they have something which can really make a change. You become bewildered and overwhelmed when you see a world around you and you feel powerless. But a spiritualist knows that I have something which can change people's lives. I have something which can make a positive difference. Yeah, maybe I'm not going to change the whole world, but I can go out there and touch one person's life. And therefore you wake up in the world and you feel inspired. Martin Luther King said, the people who want peace have to be as inspired, as organized, and as hardworking as the people who want war. And therefore the conscious change maker wakes up in the morning with purpose and knows, I've got an amazing thing to do today. There's no time to waste. And so how do we deal with all of these, the chaos around us? Well, Rumi says, the fire inside of you has to burn more intensely than the fire outside of you. And when that fire inside of you is burning, the fire of wanting to really serve and contribute and touch someone's life and really try to bring people to what they're really looking for, then all the fires outside of you are consumed within that, your enthusiasm to just go out there and do something. So I think it's a beautiful life, yeah, a life of giving.
One of the potential pitfalls I see when it comes to what you're saying and that kind of service is falling into an ego trap and making it about yourself. So if the fire has to burn bright and big enough, there has to be some level of dissolution of the ego where the individual, like, I understand that I'm giving because of something bigger than me, because I'm in service to something greater than myself, of which I might be a part. But as I said, there's always that risk of making it about myself and feeding my ego instead. It's obviously walking a fine line. So how do we avoid, when we are doing service, making ourselves the center of what we're doing?
Yeah. One of my teachers once said to me, you may love to preach, but do you love the people you preach to? Yeah. And that really made me think that, yeah, maybe I am going out in the world and doing all of these things and sharing a message, wisdom that breeds. And but do I care? Do I love the people? Is it about them, or is it about my own name, my own fame, my own kind of gain? So that requires a deep honesty. That requires a deep introspection. And personally, I think that's a constant battle.
It's good.
I think the battle to be selfless is a battle that you fight every single day, because we have this tendency to always slip back into selfishness. And I think that battle to constantly be checking your motivations, to constantly be introspective, to ask, is it about me or is it about this person? I think that constant battle is good, because it's that constant awareness that it's really not about me. It's really about helping this person to be the best they can. So, I think that just requires a lot of deep introspection, and I don't think it's a battle you win, but it's a battle that you constantly fight. And in fighting it, you are winning it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so Thank you so much. So, Keshava Swami, thank you so much for asking us to ask questions. Thank you for pushing me outside my comfort zone and being here tonight. But I really appreciate it. And I'm sure that you have so many people here that want to ask you some questions. So I think now is the time that we open it up to the audience to ask questions if they raise their hand. You can
We knew that was coming.
How are you, Keshava?
Nice to see you.
Yes. I've actually got three, but I'm going to try and limit it. So my first question is, you mentioned about self-actualization, and honestly, this has been an ongoing thing. I'm like, how do I self-actualize? But what does that mean to you? What does a self-actualized person look like? So that's question number one. Question number two is, when...
Can I do that one first?
Yeah, do that one.
What does a self-actualized person look like? I guess the most simple way to explain it would be this. Number one, you know what kind of car you have. And number two, you know where you're supposed to be driving it. In other words, self-actualization, number one, means to deeply understand what are the gifts, what are the unique abilities, what is the character, what is this chapter of life? What do you have at your disposal to make a contribution to other people? To deeply understand your dharma is the first aspect of self-actualization, because most people are just not self-aware. Most people don't know their strengths or weaknesses. Most people don't know their emotional triggers or their behavioral habits. Most people don't know what kind of habitat they strive in, because we've become so expert at ignoring ourselves and burying our identity underneath the opinions, the narratives of this world. And so the first aspect of self-actualization is to know your car, to know what kind of vehicle you've been given. And the second aspect of self-actualization is to know, where do I want to drive my car? Where am I supposed to be going? Yes, I have all these abilities. How am I meant to utilize them? And what am I trying to actually achieve on a deeper spiritual level? And in that way, I think then you become aware and also orientated. So it's self-actualization in the most simple sense is two things: awareness and orientation. To know yourself and to know where you're going. And most people don't know either of those things. And therefore they're imprisoned in inauthenticity. They're not living their real life, because life has just become so busy that they've become disconnected from awareness and orientation. Does that help?
That was great. Thank you. And then my second question, just with regards to this theme, is are there certain areas where if you're making change in that area, that is you being a conscious change maker? So all things being equal, are there certain areas where it's better to focus your attention? And then a related question.
Areas you mean outside of yourself or inside of yourself?
Let's say change in the world, right?
Okay,
Are there
yeah.
certain areas that you should be thinking about, like focusing your attention on? And I guess it's a related question really, but what are the key qualities of a conscious change maker?
Yeah.
So did that.
Yes, so we all may not be able to, there's a certain part of this world that we're meant to all make a contribution to. For us, it will be, for some of us, it will be, we all just have our playground in which we're meant to kind of make a change. So I think we don't need to try to be something artificial. We just need to try to understand our role and what we can do and what we've been gifted with, and just give ourselves fully to that, and not try to imitate someone else's playground in which they're supposed to change something. So yes, I think we all have our own places, our own things, our own areas where we'll make a difference. And how to be a conscious change maker? As I said, I think it begins with integrity, living what you seek to share with the world. That has to be the starting point. And then I think it requires a lot of sensitivity. It requires one to understand what are the needs, the interests, the concerns. How can I actually reach the people? How can I actually connect with this part of the world that I'm trying to change? We have to listen deeply. We have to hear the unheard, see the unseen. We have to try to really educate ourselves in the area that or the people that we're trying to change. And then I think the third thing is to genuinely try to develop love and compassion. If you look at the word revolution, then hidden within the word revolution is the word love. Because an ounce of love is worth a ton of work. And so anything that you try to do devoid of love will never really penetrate the world in a deep way. And so then to genuinely try to do something with love, with compassion, with kindness, with heart, then it has its full impact. So the qualities of a conscious change maker: integrity, sensitivity, and then ultimately an affinity or some love towards the people or the thing that we try to do.
Thank you. And sorry, one last question. Sorry, Mahoka. But if you're scared, what if you're afraid? What if you know that?
That's good. If you're not afraid, it means you're not doing anything significant.
Good.
Yes. Therefore, the fire within you has to burn brighter than the fire outside of you. You see, fearless people are not ones who don't have any fears. Fearless people are the ones who have a purpose which is so great that it outweighs their fears.
Good.
To become fearless doesn't mean to find something I don't have a fear about. No, that's not fearlessness. Fearlessness means to find something that's so amazing that it outweighs all the fears that will take you, that are required to get to that thing. And so, yes, anything you try to do to really make a difference will require a certain amount of discomfort. You see, like when it comes to difficulty, I was thinking about this the other day. If I ask you, what's the opposite of easy? What would you say?
Hard.
Right? Hard. I look at it a different way. I think the opposite of easy is impossible. And the middle way is difficult. What we've done in our world is we've made difficult the opposite of easy, and therefore anything difficult, we've made it an extreme. And therefore we say, no, don't take on difficulty. But actually, the opposite of easy is impossible, and difficulty is the middle part. So if you want to walk the most fruitful path, it's the middle path, and the middle path is the difficulty. Learn to become comfortable with the uncomfortable, and that discomfort brings you to the great potential that's latent within you. And so I think, you know, in a world which is like, in which we've become so kind of couched in comfort and convenience and cushy life, North London, we're missing out. So it's good. Discomfort is good.
Thank you.
Sorry? Hello. So I'd love some advice. I feel like potentially this question, people may be able to relate to it, whether or not it's the exact person that I'm talking about in my life, but maybe somebody in their life. So some advice in the sense of, I like to think of myself as a little mini conscious change maker. And I would most probably say I'm definitely the only one in my family that's kind of there. So obviously there's love within my family, obviously. But what I would say is that there's a couple of members in my family that I'm really working in the energy of love and compassion and patience a lot of the time. But sometimes when I spend time with them, I feel really bad, if that makes any sense to anybody. Which sounds awful because it's your family, so you should always, you know, if you spend time with your family, you should always, you know, feel love. But
bad as in drained.
Sorry?
Bad as in drained.
Bad as in
drained. Okay.
Just crying, like literally just like really like not feeling nice. So I don't want to just go, oh, I'm cutting you from my life, because obviously it's a family member. And there's love there, but I kind of don't like walking away from somebody and just constantly feeling really, really sad and really, really bad. So just maybe some advice on, if you can, I don't know, it might be a really hard question, but how to kind of just go about that. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm really trying to come at it with love, but then every time I come away, I just always feel really bad. So maybe I need to bring them here. So yeah, that's my question.
Thank you so much. Yeah. What about when we're giving, and we just feel like there's no reciprocation, there's no acknowledgement? How do we deal with that? Do we just keep giving? And I think we have to acknowledge that we're works in progress. We don't have an endless amount and stream of selflessness at this stage in our spiritual growth. And therefore, we need to protect ourselves. And protect ourselves means sometimes you have to give a relationship a bit of space, a relationship a bit of a break, without closing the door, without shutting it down, But sometimes time is amazing. When you go away, you give it a break, that person evolves, you evolve, you come back together again. It sometimes can change and shift something. So sometimes just giving a relationship a little bit of space is required. And sometimes we just go like to one extreme or another, like either I'm all in or it's just cut it off. And we can just give it a bit of breathing space and just let it be. So I think, again, that middle path is a useful one. But yes, it's interesting that as we do become more and more spiritually evolved, we become more and more able to give without feeling drained. This is a very mystical thing. Often some of you have heard me quote this poem of Mother Teresa. So by her bed in, I think, her Calcutta orphanage, she had this poem, Do It Anyway.
Yes.
And you've heard that poem, right? Just to paraphrase, she says, you know, sometimes people are illogical, unreasonable, ungrateful, be kind anyway. Sometimes people will misjudge you for the good that you do. Be good anyway. Sometimes people will take advantage of your generosity. Be generous anyway. And then she says in the final line, you see, in the final analysis, it's between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. And it's very powerful that when one is connecting with the divine, when one is so nourished by their vertical relationship with divinity, then in all the horizontal relationships of this world, they can give freely without need for, they can just give endlessly. And therefore you find these incredible spiritual people who just keep giving, even when people are not reciprocating, because clearly they're drawing from another source. And so when we're experiencing the love of the divine, the love of our spiritual connection, then we'll find we're able to give in our relationships with so much more. And that's why sometimes we say, nowadays people don't like to be alone because being alone means you're lonely. But you could also see that being alone is solitude. And in solitude, you can connect with something higher. And when you take some time for solitude, then when you come back together to connect with someone else, you can actually connect in a much more significant way.
Amen.
And therefore, spending time connecting with that divine source empowers all your relationships of this world. So that's an aspirational destination.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Lucky.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for wonderful evening, wonderful talk, and wonderful questions. I only stumbled across this place actually to be here today. I had an hour and a half to kill, but I'm very glad that I killed my hours here. So my question is, you talked about your strengths or weaknesses in the journey towards becoming more a conscious gentleman. So I know a couple of my weaknesses that I will share, and to get your take on, in a modern world, how you can deal with that.
Sure.
So one would be in the workplace where I'm in the fortunate position where I can work with many younger people in their first, second job after university and give them opportunities to develop their craft, to become the same things I was given 15, 20 years ago. Now, when I'm doing that, I feel like I'm empowering them, but I also feel bloody good. My achievements actually completed more than I would do otherwise. So how do I deal with that level of, it's like my ego being bolstered, where, my ego being bolstered, is that okay? Because it's okay to feel good about yourself? So that's one question. You can deal with that one first?
Okay, let's do that one. When we serve others, there's always a sense of ego that comes up, because actually when we serve others, there's a sense in which we're helping. We kind of can psychologically put ourselves in a higher position than them, thinking us to be uplifting them. And therefore a sense of superiority or, that can come up in our consciousness.
Definitely.
As I was mentioning earlier on today, I grew up in Wembley. And after I became a monk, and even after I decided to take lifelong vows of renunciation, I regularly go back to Wembley. And what I actually do sometimes is I just walk around all the places I grew up in. And I remember where I came from. I remember where I was, who I was, what I was doing. They say when you go back to your old town, it's like going to a museum of your old bad habits, And it's very sobering, because you realize, who am I? Who was I? Just some guy, just some person in this world. But then so many people entered my life, so many grace, and so much grace, so many blessings, so many opportunities. Basically, I'm a product of the grace that I received from others. Nobody in this world is self-made. And if someone says that, they're in the biggest illusion. And I think, therefore, when we're constantly realizing that I'm just a product of everyone that helped me, and I'm just passing on that help to someone else to try and so they can go on that journey, you kind of stop seeing yourself as some special kind of conscious change maker in the chain, but you rather just see yourself as someone continuing the legacy of grace, but that you're just an instrument in that journey of that person. And so I find that to be very helpful for me, to just realize that I'm just passing on what I received, and that I'm no special person in this chain.
Thank you. Can I get the second part of that question?
Yeah, sure.
So one of the things I liked about COVID was the fact that
be careful, this is online and this is recorded.
the freedom of spaciousness, so you're walking, you're not bumping into people, you have your space. Of course, now we're resuming back to the real world, and so constantly surrounded by lots of people. So one sparkling on a connection with friends, relationships, etc. One area that I do find myself getting very irritated, which reminds me of before COVID, was when you're walking down a busy street and people are so immersed in their world and their phones and just running into people constantly. And I know that shouldn't irritate me, because I know that's, I might do that occasionally as well, but it does irritate me. Even if I'm in a good mood, it just irritates me. How can you place those small, and how can you be so inconsiderate? That, of course, in their world, they're not being inconsiderate, they're just doing the next thing they need to do to cross it off their list. So how do you reconcile yourself as somebody who wants to change and is doing their work, but also feels really irritated by the minutiae of lifestyle claims?
What was the last thing you said? By that?
But we're just irritated by the minutiae of the kind of small,
the small things,
irritating things that,
That's me.
that's it.
Yeah. What to do?
Just
You want to say something on this?
It's got a question.
It's got a question.
this.
I think I take it that when I get irritated by things, I take it as a good reminder for myself that I'm still a work in progress, that such things still kind of irritate me, and why am I so affected by that? I think it's very grounding. Sometimes our weaknesses can become our greatest strengths when those weaknesses bring about a humility. And so the fact that, people can still irritate us and we can still be cheesed off by insignificant things helps us to realize, I'm not there yet. Why am I so affected? It's a good reminder. It's a good reminder for us to Another thing we realize is, we probably embody a certain amount of that ourselves. One of the students of Bhaktivedanta Swami, he came to the Swami and he said, I just can't tolerate this person anymore. And the Swami said to him, you have to tolerate him just as I'm tolerating you. So we tend to have this kind of notion that everyone else is irritating and I'm the easiest guy to live with in this world. If only everyone was just like me, it would just be amazing. But we tend to be a little irritating ourselves, and we have our own idiosyncrasies and other things that kind of get on people's nerves. So I think it's good sometimes to reflect on that and to... And then I think the third thing is that the world is just meant to make us tolerant. I think sometimes the perfection is not to not be agitated by things, but it's to learn how to control yourself in that emotion without reacting and without it leading to a degradation of your own consciousness. And I think that exercise whereby you get agitated by something, but you go through the internal processing to not allow it to bring you down in your goodness, is actually the victory. The victory is not seeing all of those things, but it's not reacting adversely to those things. And therefore, the world is wired to just make us tolerant, because there'll be bigger things to tolerate in life. And the smaller things that we have to tolerate help us to build our capacity for other things and build that immunity.